کنفرانس در پارلمان انگلستان. بحران اتمی و نقض حقوق بشر در ایران، اعتصاب غذا و کارزار جهانی برای آزادی 7 گروگان اشرفی و حفاظت از لیبرتی. 10 دسامبر 2013، 19 آذر 1392. لورد تونی کلارک، عضو مجلس اعیان، رئیس پیشین حزب کارگر. بارونس ترنر، عضو مجلس اعیان. بارونس نایت، عضو مجلس اعیان. لورد فرانک جاد، عضو مجلس اعیان. لورد ایدن، عضو مجلس اعیان. لورد مگینس، عضو مجلس اعیان. برایان بینلی، نماینده پارلمان انگلستان. الفین لوید، نماینده پارلمان انگلستان. مارک ویلیامز، نماینده پارلمان انگلستان. دیوید ایمس، نماینده پارلمان انگلستان. استیو مککیب، نماینده پارلمان انگلستان. دکتر متیو آفورد، نماینده پارلمان انگلستان. سر جفری بایندمن، حقوقدان با رتبه مشاورت ملکه. مالکوم فاولر، عضو کمیته بین المللی حقوق بشر در کانون وکلای انگلستان و ولز. و طاهر بومدرا، مسئول پرونده اشرف در سازمان ملل.
A very busy time for many people, but as we think about our busy time and the meeting we're going to have, can we spare a few moments thought for those brave hunger strikers who are 101 days?
Yes.
101 days have been making this protest. These brave people who are showing by example to the world. I'm just personally sorry that they have to do it. I had was that it's an indictment on us all. Or in all free democracies, it's an indictment that people have to put their lives and health to draw a theme that we will be discussing again this morning. Now, we all know who's pulling the strings of the puppet, Maliki, for those people who have been incarcerated in Iraq. And as I said when it began, let us give thought to those people and just remember that our actions, little as they are, do reverberate in many parts of the world. And in this Parliament, we are going to continue. Most of the colleagues that are involved in it are tireless in exposing what's going on. Some of you, the older ones, will remember all those years ago when I publicly told off Jack Straw for the way in which he put the MOI on the prescribed list of terrorist organisations. At that time, we had a Labour government, he was Home Secretary, and some of us went to see him. And I in particular reminded him of the way in which the British Labour Party had welcomed Madam Rajavi and the people of the PMOI and gave them support. And then we find out that he, as Home Secretary, put them on the list. When I asked him the question, why are you doing this, Jack? He said, we're in government now. What an indictment that is too. And then today someone's just drawn my attention to a little thing in a diary here. It's some woman's writing, Kaya Burge, I think. Jack Straw calls Iran the most difficult country to negotiate in the dispensable nation by Vali Naza. He compares it to negotiating on the price of a car and turning up to find it has no tyres because they were not part of the discussion. And then having to worry about the metalwork was also part of the deal. This should give you a sense of what talking to Iran looks like. Quite seriously, This man, who is now being hailed as a moderate, Rouhani, is a wicked man. In a speech on the 21st of November in this House with the various speakers to look at the various jobs that this man Rouhani has had under the regime. He has served his masters well, and that's why I call him a butcher, because he has stood silent, and since his appointment as the Premier, he's presided over 300 people being hung. But what he has got, part of his track record, is the fact he can con people. In 2005, talking about the talks that were going on at that time on nuclear proliferation and the enrichment program in Iran, Mr. Rouhani, he says, I duped the West. As I see it, we've got to redouble our efforts to expose the evilness of this man and to keep thinking not just of our wonderful friends on hunger strike, but those hundreds of thousands of people who are suffering repression in Iran itself. I said it last week again, I raised a question, and Baroness Vazi, a woman I have the greatest respect for, the Minister of State for the Foreign Office, if you're going to talk with the devil, take a big long spoon, because there's a self-confessed crook here who conned the people of the West in the past, and it looks like he's doing it again now. Sanctions were working. Sanctions were working. The sanctions we called upon our governments and others to, over the years we've been pleading to put some pressure on these wicked people, and it was working. And why are they falling for it again? You know my own personal views are always that they're so more worried about oil than they are about human beings. I'm old enough to remember Chamberlain coming back. He did a deal, didn't he? He did a deal with a Nazi. But we cannot remain silent. We have to keep on and on and on. And I plead with everybody here to use every energy to carry on the fight of exposition, the fight of trying to get the message out to people and give some comfort to these wonderful people who put their lives on the line. Thank you very much.
در پی سخنان لورد کلارک که ریاست کنفرانس پارلمانی را بر عهده داشت، خانم دولت نوروزی نماینده شورای ملی مقاومت ایران در انگلستان پیام رئیس جمهور برگزیده مقاومت خطاب به این کنفرانس را قرائت کرد. رئیس جمهور برگزیده مقاومت خانم مریم رجوی در پیام خود ضمن قدردانی از احساس مسئولیت اعضای مجلسین انگلستان نسبت به حقوق مردم و مقاومت ایران و با اشاره به بحران اتمی رژیم و مذاکرات و توافقنامه ژنو گفت: مشکل مردم ایران با دیکتاتوری آخوندها به برنامه اتمی که علیه مصالح مردم ایران است محدود نمی شود. مسئله اصلی ربودن حق حاکمیت و آزادی مردم ایران به وسیله آخوندهاست. به رغم دعاوی آخوند روحانی در مورد میانه روی، از زمان روی کار آمدن او شمار اعدام‌های ثبت شده به 400 مورد می‌رسد. اجازه بدهید که در گرامی داشته روز جهانی حقوق بشر تأکید کنم که بیعملی و چشم بستن در قبال نقض وحشیانه حقوق بشر در ایران به خاطر مذاکرات اتمی یک اشتباه کشنده است. این سیاست آخوندها را در زمینه اتمی مهاجمتر می کند. خانم رجوی با محکوم کردن بیعملی دولت‌های غربی در قبال جنایت علیه بشریت در اشرف تأکید کرد: محاصره و شکنجه روانی و کشتار اشرفی‌ها توسط دولت دست نشانده ملاها در عراق در 5 سال گذشته بدون نقض مکرر تعهدات مکتوب از جانب آمریکا و ملل متحد برای تضمین حفاظت و امنیت ساکنان اشرف امکان پذیر نبود. رئیس جمهور برگزیده مقاومت با یادآوری اعتصاب غذای جانکاه مجاهدان لیبرتی و ایرانیان در 8 کشور جهان برای به حرکت درآوردن وجدان جامعه جهانی در قبال این بی‌عدالتی بزرگ، خطاب به نمایندگان مجلسین انگلستان گفت: همزمان با روز جهانی حقوق بشر از شما می‌خواهم و از طریق شما به دولت بریتانیا و همچنین دولت آمریکا فراخوان می‌دهم که پرونده نقض حقوق بشر توسط این رژیم را به شورای امنیت ببرید. معاملات اقتصادی با این رژیم را به توقف اعدام‌ها مشروط سازید. پرونده قتل عام و گروگانگیری در اشرف را به شورای امنیت و دادگاه جنایی بین المللی بفرستید. امنیت و حفاظت مجاهدان لیبرتی را تأمین کنید.
Ladies and gentlemen, this agreement was brokered on the back of crippling international sanctions and a fear that the regime might see a return to the popular protests that caused them so much difficulty during 2009. And if they're serious about Geneva, why did the Deputy Foreign Minister, who's part of the negotiating team, say almost immediately afterwards the text of the agreement between Iran and the P5+1 cannot be considered a legal accord with binding commitments? Hardly evidence of good faith. And let's not forget, President Rouhani, that the regime has been condemned 60 times at the United Nations for human rights violations. There have been more than 600 recorded cases of executions and public hangings this year alone. The regime continues to ban the use of satellite dishes, impose censorship, filter websites and social networks. It deprives its citizens of the freedoms we take for granted in this country. And we haven't forgotten the individuals. They're not just numbers to us. We remember Ahmad Saif Panahi, arrested at 16 and hanged after 8 years of torture and imprisonment. We remember the Baluchi political prisoners executed in Zahedan in retaliation for an attack on regime forces. This was the arbitrary execution of political prisoners as an act of revenge. And of course, there's Ashraf and liberty. The way Western powers respond to these events has been watched closely in Tehran. If we look weak and indifferent, they will interpret that as a green light for more brutality. We need to tell Iraq, release the Ashraf hostages now or lose all aid and all support.
It's a great pleasure to be here and to hear Tony's comments as well today. It's been just over 3 months now since that horrific footage was filmed, and that resulted in the death of 52 people and the kidnap of 7 more whose fate remains unknown. Words are all very well, but we need action for those people, and indeed for the people here today, who I'd ask once again if you could show your appreciation for what they're doing. It's simply not enough for us just to condemn what happened, but we want some firm action taken against Iran. And that's why I remain sceptical about the recent deal that occurred over the weapons and the nuclear capability of Iran. But if we stop to consider who is Rouhani, I think that leads us to assumptions about whether we can do a deal with him or not. And I would say not. Let's not forget that he is the man who led Iran's nuclear negotiations and went back and said that he'd achieved a good deal when, in fact, he didn't do anything. So I'm not convinced that he is the moderniser that he claimed he would be when he was elected early this year. If we just look back at his track record, since being elected, over 400 people have been executed, as we've already heard. His work in places like Syria continues unabated, keeping the civil war in that country going by providing not only support, but also finances and arms and men on the ground. I don't think the people whose families have been killed in Syria would say he's a moderniser. And of course, we don't forget the people in Camp Ashraf, facilitating attacks upon the camp, killing innocent people. That is not the sign of a moderniser to me. And it does concern me, and it still makes me very angry, that we provided military troops to Iraq, and this is the way we've been paid back, by a regime that continues to kill and maim and repress its citizens, both in the camps and also within its own country's borders as well. Therefore, I repeat my claim, or my assertion, that the Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary of this country, and indeed President Obama, and indeed Senator Kerry, continues their efforts to release the 7 hostages as soon as possible. We are not prepared to allow them to remain in captivity. We must make clear to Iran that there will be serious consequences if they don't comply with this. Simple freedom for these people. But people often say, well, what more can we do apart from sanctions? Well, I still think there are other sanctions to be held, but there is a third and final issue that I would advocate for our government to follow. And that would be to support Madam Rajavi in her fight, in what she's achieving. We have heard today her words of what she wants to do for the country, for the people of the country, and indeed for the international community as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here, and I just want to say solidarity to you all, and more importantly, through you all, to those who are struggling still within Iran. I have long believed that the essential cornerstone of stability and security is a situation in which human rights prevail. I fail to see how, in the absence of human rights, there can be security. I also, of course, believe passionately that the fulfillment of human rights are the mark of a decent, civilized society. Whatever the political arrangements that may have been made in recent times, what I'm concerned about is the daily reports, which I still feel utterly numbed by, of the executions, of the torture, which seem to me an absolute denial of what civilized society is about, and which seem to me to be no basis on which we can be sure of a stable, secure future. I think that if we care, that caring must be universal. And it's in that context that I'm glad to be here today and to say that until we have started to build convincingly a society based on human rights, justice, transparency, and accountable government, security in Iran, for the people of Iran, will never be assured.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. I'm always very moved on these occasions. One of these days, perhaps, there'll be priority given to the representative or representatives from the Foreign Office. Where are they? Where are the media? It's deeply disturbing that that should be the case. I speak on behalf of the Law Society and therefore many, many thousands of solicitors. The president, the current president of the Law Society, back on the 16th of October of this year, gave me 5 minutes to explain to a 100-strong council all about this. The Human Rights Committee is very much engaged in all of that, and the protests do have some effect. I insist, measurable effect. And I say this as well. This was raised at the Human Rights Committee in Chancery Lane on the 19th of November. I'm at Council this afternoon, and they will know there, once again, where I've been this morning. And, you know, we are, to an extent, making a difference. 101 days of hunger strike. No human being should be placed in a position like that. Many others of our friends are on hunger strike in many, many countries. Promises were made, again, by various people in authority. Just words. We have to continue to intervene in every conceivable way that we can. Here I am spreading the message. Knowledge cascades. In the end, knowledge is power. We all, in our different ways, can do things. You all, in one way or another, do. Despair cannot be on our agenda. This is too important, and it reverberates beyond the residence. It has to do with world peace. I want to end by absolutely assuring everyone here that I have the support of the Law Society Council. I have the support of the officers, and interventions there will continue to be made, and every effort through all contacts available will continue. Never doubt that. Never doubt us. I am one modest, rather aging solicitor, but I speak for all those others. Please, never doubt it.
I, like you all, am immensely moved by what we have seen and by what we have heard. But I am fully aware of the fact that we also need to move the ratchet on in some way. We also need to find a formula to achieve a change. And it's not easy. In the international sphere, we should not hesitate to voice our protest and our horror at what is being done. We cannot be selective in our dismay and in our dislike. If something is being done in any part of the world against
human rights and human dignity and human life, our voice of protest should be heard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I would like to focus on a few points very quickly. Basically, the issue of 1st of September, the attack that killed 52 people. Al-Maliki, Prime Minister of Iraq, announced the next day that they didn't know about it, and the abducted people, but they also don't know about where their whereabouts. Let me tell you with certainty. I'm not speculating. I'm telling you exactly what happened. There is no way for any attackers, assailants, to reach Camp Ashraf, to enter Camp Ashraf, kill 52 people, explode buildings and vehicles, and basically wage war within the camp without the active participation of the Iraqi forces. Now, this has happened in July 2009. It happened again in April 2011. And I was the person in charge of fact-finding in these situations. And as usual, the Iraqis always, at the beginning, deny the acts. And later on, they admit them. And let me add that the 7 abducted people, the Iraqi government is holding them in the green zone. Yes. And the diplomatic missions, particularly the British embassy, the American embassy, they are the leaders in terms of representation in Baghdad. They know that the government of Iraq is holding them. So this is the trend, this is the pattern of conduct of the government of Iraq. And I would probably apologize not to say government of Iraq. I would say the Prime Minister's office, who have his own security forces to undertake this kind of operations. When you have the diplomatic missions in Baghdad and the United Nations trying to cover up what al-Maliki's government is doing, yes, there is hardly anything we could do but to raise our voices to say no to complacency. No to complacency, because we know Geneva Accord was the result of this kind of complacency, where, and it explains to a lot of people who were raising the question, why governments are not acting on this situation of the Ashrafis. And it's quite clear. There are a lot of interest. There are a lot of interest involved. The United Nations will not act. They are there to support al-Maliki. They are there to facilitate his work. And this is the reality that I personally objected to, and I resigned because of it. The action now we need is to say no to complacency. We need the 7 abducted people to be freed. So the diplomatic missions need to also raise their voice with al-Maliki and tell him to free these people. And I'm sure the United Nations, if they wanted to do a positive action, they would have done it by now. I take this opportunity to thank very much the independent special rapporteurs and experts of the United Nations in Geneva, who had the courage yesterday to issue an appeal to the government of Iraq to free the hostages and also to undertake an independent investigation. An independent investigation should come from independent body. I thank you very much.